This is the Vivo X200 Pro and this is the Oppo Find X8 Pro. They're both made by BBK Electronics in China, both share a lot of similarities. So what exactly is different, and which is the best? Which should you buy? I'm Cam Bunton, this is Trusted Reviews, and in this video I'll answer those questions. Now when it comes to design and durability, there's very little to separate the Oppo and the Vivo phones. They're practically the same height, width and thickness. The Vivo is a tad heavier, probably down to that chunkier camera island on the back, but not enough to make any real difference to what it's like to hold and use the phones. Any differences are subtle, like for instance, how the curved glass on the edges of the display and the rear panel flow more smoothly and seamlessly on the Oppo phone than they do on the Vivo. That makes it a bit more comfy to hold, and means you don't really notice the metal frame around the edges as much. Similarly, despite the fact that both of these phones have a frosted glass finish, the Oppo's has a little more texture, so it's less slippery. But while they look and feel largely the same, the Oppo does have a couple of additional features that add to the functionality of the phone. There's an alert slider switch on the left, so you can switch between ring, silent and vibrate easily. Vivo doesn't have this. Oppo also has something called a quick button on the right edge. It's a touch-sensitive control that you can double press to launch the camera and then swipe up and down to zoom in and out, switching fluidly between the multiple lenses. Now, while I rarely found myself wanting to use the camera control, the alert slider switch is something that I use almost every day and I find it incredibly useful. Both are water and dust resistant to the same IP68 and IP69 levels, so if you drop them in the bath or get caught in the rain, they should survive just fine. Now moving on, and I'll not spend absolutely ages talking about the displays because, like a lot of the features here, the two are largely very similar. Both are 6.78-inch panels with 4,500 nits peak brightness and up to 120Hz refresh rates. They're both LTPO screens too, which means the refresh rate can change at incremental levels to ensure it's conserving as much battery as possible when there's nothing moving or animating on the display. In their default display color modes, the Vivo is more saturated. Often when there are reds, oranges or any warm colors on the screen, they're more overtly warm than they should be. Oppo is by default more realistic and muted, and it's the look that I prefer. And there's a reason for that. Oppo's default mode is called Natural, and so if you switch the Vivo to the Professional option in the display settings menu, the two, again, look largely the same. Both similar sharpness, both similar brightness, both similar in terms of colors if you choose the respective color modes that work. So again, not a lot to separate them here, at least not enough difference for you to base a purchasing decision on. So let's move on. Now, because so much of these two phones is the same, software plays a fairly important role in the experience of these two phones. And even though FunTouch OS on the Vivo feels like a skinned, forked version of ColorOS that runs on the Oppo, there are some differences. The thing that stands out in a very surface-level way is how much more tuned towards customization the Oppo software is. It may have a lot of the same basic options, but Oppo elevates them to the top, so you get to different customization choices like font style and icon size and shape much more easily, either direct from the home screen or in the customization app in the main settings app. Oppo gives more tweaking options and presents those different options in a more graphically rich way, making it easier to get everything in one screen. You get more styles of system-wide font to choose from, as well as more options for things like fingerprint animations and precisely choosing which colors from your wallpaper you want to match in the system accents. There's also a richer choice of notification sounds and tones, and the O haptics feature which offers tight, precise haptic feedback for different actions in the software. So like the physical design, there's this sense that there's just a bit more attention to detail and precision. You get Google baked in a lot of places on both devices, so Google Gemini is the default assistant, and you get all the default Google apps installed as standard. And both Vivo and Oppo tend to load quite a lot of bloat on here too. So you get those default recommended folders of apps and hot apps and games on your home screen, but you can disable those quite easily. Speaking performance and battery life, there's very little to separate these two phones here, if only because they're both fairly similar. They both have virtually identical internals, both powered by the MediaTek Dimensity 9400, and both have large silicon carbon batteries. The Oppo has 5,910 mAh, the Vivo has 6,000. But the amount of screen time you'll get from the two is largely the same. We're talking maybe 10 or 15 minutes difference. Both will comfortably get through a full busy day, even for the most demanding of users with hours of screen time. For my own use, which is typically 2 to 3 hours of quite casual light usage, I could finish the day with more than 40% left over on both phones. And that's with a mixed usage split between casual games, camera testing, video streaming, and a mix of social media and news. So if I'm conservative with my use, I could probably get 2 days from both. For gamers, both are very powerful phones, comfortable with demanding titles. They benchmark up there with the most powerful phones on the market and only lag behind the Snapdragon 8 Elite phones, which is a monster of a processor. But honestly, when it came to just using them every day as my daily device, switching between apps, gaming, or whatever I was doing, it was really hard to tell any difference between them. So let's move on to cameras, where we're going to finally see some differences. So this is an area where things can get potentially very interesting because they both have very strong camera systems, but Vivo has gone to town on the third camera, the periscope zoom lens. Talking specs, Oppo has 4 sensors, all of them are 50 megapixels. There are 2 zoom cameras, one is 3 times, the other 6 times, plus the usual ultra-wide and primary. Vivo has done the zoom a bit differently. It has a 3.7 times periscope style zoom, but one which not only has a 200 megapixel sensor to shoot with, but also a much larger sensor than usual. In fact, the zoom sensor is as big as the main sensor on the Oppo. That means better low light and the ability to digitally zoom or crop into it without losing lots of detail. Similarly, the primary 50 megapixel sensor is also larger than the Oppo's, featuring larger pixels for better light and color capture. The ultrawide, well, that's largely the same as the Oppo ultrawide. In the daytime, both phones are great photography tools. Neither has an incredible ultra-wide camera, but both do a decent job of supplementing the other lenses and offering extra wide shots of landscapes when needed. There are some differences in terms of contrast, texture, and color. They're not massive. Both tend to soften details a little to smooth out noise when using the zoom cameras, leaving the shots looking a little bit smooth, like a painting when pushed too far. Oppo also tended to sometimes have this almost hazy, foggy look around certain parts of images, where it was trying to lighten shadows and dark spots in bushes and trees, but it wasn't consistent in this. I think for the most part, the Oppo was better at retaining more realistic textures when zooming in further, where I struggled with motion blur on the Vivo when I pushed it way past its optical zoom limit. But the experience of taking macro shots is quite different with the two phones. Oppo's macro mode lets you use the camera in a traditional sense, getting close up to a subject and taking a photo. Vivo's method means relying on the zoom, so you have to be quite a bit further away from the subject. And that can mean it's harder to get a steady shot with every bit of hand movement magnified and exaggerated. Despite that, I struggled to get the Oppo focused, sharp and free of any blur. The Vivo shots in macro and in a lot of other situations were crisper. And in macro mode, the background blur was more natural too, giving the images a much more pleasant depth of field when shooting small plant life, for example. Now it has to be said, the whole time I've been testing these phones over the last few weeks, there's been no days where there's been blue sky, bright lights, dark shadows and lots of contrasting light conditions, or even any heavy backlighting. So sadly, not been able to test it in those conditions yet. Now at night time, both have a dedicated night mode, although Vivo has now moved its own version inside a camera mode called Landscape, which is effectively a scene optimization mode that does a lot of aggressive processing around colors, sharpness and detail. And the end result for night shots is that most of the time, the Oppo more faithfully captures the colors and details in the scene. Shots from the Vivo were often a lot more colorful, which looks great, but similar to Samsung's, means skies get quite blue at nighttime even when they're not, and other colors are oversaturated. Combined with the boosted contrast and the processing of textures, it gave some shots a bit of an oil painting-like texture, leaving images looking quite crushed and contrasty where Oppo's had textures that looked real. Just look at the textures of the soft toys in these claw machines, and how the Oppo's shots actually give the toys a fur that looks as soft as it is in real life, and retains the color accuracy. Neither was perfect though, often struggling with stabilization, blur and focusing, particularly when using the ultra-wide camera. It has to be said though, these were all taken on a very windy evening, which made it really difficult to hold the phones completely still. So given the challenging conditions, neither was terrible. Video is decent on both too, but I think the Vivo trumps the Oppo here, and not just because it can shoot up to 8K, but because it seems to cope better with movement and also textures on closer objects. Oppo struggles with these closer objects in video and often has a harsher, grainier texture to shots that are boosted in the highlights too much. A lot of this is down to the superior zoom camera on the Vivo again, so in the camera department across the board, this better zoom lens and sensor makeup makes a pretty big difference, whether you're shooting video, macros, portraits, or photos of faraway objects. In the end, because they're so closely matched in so many ways, it's really hard to separate these two phones. And because they were so close in so many different departments, it's really hard to choose between them. If I was picking one for myself, I'd probably go with the Oppo. It's got the nicer software, it's got more long-term software support too, with up to 5 years of updates, and I preferred the look and the processing of most of the photos, especially at night time. It's also got the nicer finish and build. However, the super macro shots on the Vivo are brilliant, and with the quality of that zoom lens, I'd be very happy to use that too. And so if you like taking shots of really far away things or really close objects, you'll get on really well with the Vivo. And if you shoot lots of video, I think the Vivo is going to be a better choice for you as well. Besides, it's so close to the Oppo in so many ways, you're not missing out at all if you go for it, and you'll save money in the process. Let me know what you think of these two phones in the comments down below, or you can grab me on social media. I'm at Cam Bunton. My BlueSky link is in the description down below. If you did like this video, please do leave a thumbs up, subscribe, and tap that notification bell, and I'll see you again in the next one. Thanks so much for watching. Bye bye.